when I got invited to kind of come here with the theme, I was thinking, oh gosh, what will I say? And at the time, because you have to give the title quite a bit ahead, I was like, translating ideals into realities. And I was just so inspired at the time. And then a couple of weeks ago when I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, what did I mean? But luckily, thinking about it, I sort of thought, oh yeah, this is kind of what I'm doing with my life. And I imagine actually quite, what quite a lot of you are possibly doing with your life. So just to kind of define ideals, I looked it up. It's a standard or principle to be aimed at, a person or thing regarded as perfect. So when I first came along, just to kind of flesh this idea of ideals out, when I first came along, I came across the Colchester Buddhist Centre and I was 24 years of age. And just prior to coming, I'd had kind of like quite a strong visionary experience, which I imagine quite a lot of us have had actually. And it had activated something in me. So it was a bit as if actually my life kind of was going okay. It wasn't like I was having a bad life or anything like that. It was kind of going okay. But in that moment, it felt as if I was deeply connected with everything. And although everything felt kind of quite solid and separate, in that moment, that was just no longer the case. There was just this kind of deep interconnectivity. It was a bit as if I was in contact with the mystery behind appearance. And it kind of reactivated something in me. And when I came to the Colchester Buddhist Centre, the first conversation I ended up having was around enlightenment. And it felt as if I'd had a glimpse of what that would be. And Dogen, a Buddhist master, described that as enlightenment is intimacy with all things. And that's how it kind of really felt, actually. So in Buddhism, when we talk about ideals, those of us who are ordained, we've got these three jewels. The yellow jewel represents the Buddha, the ideal of enlightenment to what we can aspire, that you were describing. The Dharma jewel, the blue jewel, the path of teaching or training. And the Sangha jewel, a way of being in community together to kind of help also bring that about. So although I'd had this experience, this kind of almost vision, and sort of thought, I had a bit of a taste of enlightenment, I didn't really know how to live from that, or how to transform my relationships in that way. So there's one thing having an experience, there's another thing living from that experience in every aspect of your life, and that's what I was really interested in. And when I said reactivated, sometimes, sort of when you look across your life, however long or short it's been, you can find threads. So what I sort of thought was, how would it be if I acted from that? I thought I could make a real big difference in the world if that's how I could really act. So going back even further, I lived in India for about 9 years, from the age of 4 to 13. And sort of as a kid, I saw a level of suffering and poverty that was quite harrowing, levels of disability as well, that made me just kind of think, God, how do people even live? How do they even survive, let alone do more than that? And some of the kind of disabilities and kind of injuries were deliberately brought about so that they would capture people's empathy and get money from people. So it was even sort of doubly, if you see what I mean, kind of harrowing in a way. And at the time of coming across the Colchester Buddhist Centre, I was working in a mental health unit. I was training as an occupational therapist, and I was working in a acute psychiatric unit. And I was there because, again, it was just this desire to really help. This desire to kind of, it was sort of something like I really have a sense of the preciousness of life, but times can get really, really hard, can't they, where that kind of preciousness can be lost. And that just felt really, really important to me to kind of try and make a difference. But actually, it's not very easy to turn towards suffering. It's not very easy to turn towards one's own suffering, and it's not that easy to turn towards other suffering either. So I'd done a fair bit of study and looked at different frameworks around the human experience, so to speak, or why we suffer, and done a psychology degree as well. But actually it was the Buddha's teachings that made most sense to me. And it's sort of like when you come in contact with a consciousness that's more evolved than you, you kind of know it. You don't necessarily even have to have had that experience. There's just a knowing in a bodily sense. So I just wanted to share one of those teachings, which some of you might know. And I misplaced my bit of paper, so I've got it. Technology, thank goodness. So it's from a sutta, which is a discourse. It's the Attadanda Sutta. So this is the Buddha's words. And this is a really early text, which is apparently is part of sending him on his quest. So here he says, I will relate the emotion agitating me, having seen people struggling and contending with each other like fish. In a small amount of water, fear entered me. The world is everywhere insecure, every direction is in turmoil. Desiring an abode for myself, I did not find one uninhabited. When I saw contention as a sole outcome, aversion increased in me. But then I saw an arrow, here difficult to see, set in the heart. Pierced by it, one runs in every direction, but having pulled it out, one does not run, nor does one sink. So it's a bit like when I heard that teaching, it just deeply resonated in me. So the Buddha doesn't go on to kind of really unpack the imagery of the dart, but this image of groundlessness and not finding, so you're talking about the flow of impermanence, not finding something where one could really settle on, and this image of the dart. So the way in which we habitually kind of bolster ourselves up, construct stories, try and find security, the positions we hold, the different ways we grasp at things, that is what kind of creates the dukkha in the world. That's what this dart is, what that separation is. So the Buddha's teachings were just very, very clear to me about the nature of the human condition, and all the different kinds of suffering, and the root cause of that being the sense that we feel fundamentally separate, and that is a delusion. So we end up just looking after kind of number one, and that's what that dart represents. But it also gives the vision of if you pull that dart out, you can have a radically different relationship to the world. And this image of not sinking or running. So I think in response to other people's difficulties, in response to quite desperateness, I definitely have felt kind of like desolate, you know, and sometimes when you look out at suffering, you can just kind of like the sheer volume of it is completely overwhelming. So this idea of sinking or running away, so we can get into these two strategies, can't we? You know, which them and us, something like that. So when I heard that teaching, I just sort of knew that the Buddha was my teacher. So I know it might sound a bit weird, but anyway, that's kind of what the experience was. And his words made sense. I wanted to tell you this dream that I had very briefly, because dreams are important, aren't they? And they're fun. So I used to have kind of like a bit of a, I wouldn't say recurrent dream, hopefully other people have this as well, but where I'd just be running away, like something would be chasing me in my dreams and I'd be trying to run away. And try as I might, it'd be like, next time, turn and face it. But actually, like in the dream, I'd only wake up and it would be like this fear, basically. But on one occasion, so I had this dream and I was captured. And somehow I was sitting on this sofa with this person that had captured me, and I hadn't woken from the dream, and I was feeling this fear. And I don't know, somehow in that dream, probably setting the intention for many years to try and turn towards, actually sort of managed to turn towards and saw this figure sort of shrouded in darkness. And in that moment, just seeing this outline of darkness, something really softened in me. And in that kind of softening, it was a bit like I became invisible, like that kind of desire to turn towards what some of us might call kind of a metta. I started to become invisible. So there I was thinking I was being captured. And the more I could turn towards this other, whatever this other, this darkness was, the more I could kind of just see that there was difficulty there. It was a bit like my well-wishing sort of broke down the barriers a bit, and then it was just a very radically different relationship in a way, I think. So what I'd sort of realised is treading the path, I realised that I needed a path of training, and that I'd already been slightly engaging with that. So I don't know how many here have done has anyone not done the Metta Bhavana practice, which is a loving kindness meditation practice? Okay. So I could just kind of say that the Metta Bhavana practice is a practice that the Buddha taught to some monks. So there was these monks at the foothills of the Himalayas, or Himalayas, depends if you're Indian. And they were having difficulty, so they were there trying to just gain enlightenment. But they were being beset by the local deities that they couldn't see. So their meditations were really distracted, and they were experiencing a lot of fear. So they went to the Buddha, and the Buddha gave them this teaching, which was to practice spreading well-wishing. This loving kindness in its most basic form is friendliness and well-wishing. So he taught them this teaching, and they went back and kind of practiced it. And what they realised is actually kind of trying to radiate well-wishing has an effect. So basically our practice has an effect. And they were able to meditate, and actually the local deities helped them, and it was a really lovely story. But basically the idea behind that practice is that practice helps to break down the barriers between self and other. So how long have I been going for? 10 minutes? 11 minutes, lovely. Okay, so basically what this practice enabled me to do was, although I really wanted to meet people and connect with them, I'd often experienced quite a bit of fear. Fear was quite a big working ground, actually. But this practice of habitually trying to turn towards, so the practice is in 5 stages. We start with ourselves and move out to a good friend. I really recommend, we're having led meditations here, both in the Dharma Parlour meditation dome, but also in the main dome. So do go if you can. This practice of turning towards really helped. It helped part of this process of disarming, so trying to kind of take the dart out. Because most of us are deeply ingrained to just pull away from difficult feelings. And a lot of suffering comes in our lives from unfaced and unfelt feelings. That can be our armouring in relation to others. And in a funny sort of way, the more we try and push it away, the more it ends up defining us and controlling us. So the idea that awareness is revolutionary. So the practice of metta, even ongoingly, has been about really trying to feel what I'm feeling right now, really trying to meet it. And what I've come to just realise more and more, that there's a direct relationship to my ability to be with how I'm feeling, in a way to feel my real vulnerability and my ability to connect with others. So I definitely know when I can't be with how I'm feeling, when I shut down, I'm really not that connected to others. So I know that this isn't kind of revolutionary in a way, but it's just a practice, of kind of doing it again and again. So what we push away controls us, and it disconnects us from our heart. And in a funny sort of way, we can see that in society at large, that when we don't face our own fears, the sense of other, the sense of fear increases. So we get ideas kind of coming out that maybe immigrants are rapists and drug addicts, because the more we can't turn and face things, the more fear emerges. So the process of trying to take this dart out, for me, has involved really trying to cultivate strong positive emotions to kind of really turn towards this shadow, really. And metta means basic friendliness. So Bhante Sangharakshita, who's the founder of Triratna and my teacher, has famously kind of said that without strong positive emotions, there is no spiritual life. We're not really able to get behind ourselves, or really able to transform our ideals, the energies, those sort of visions, into real lived experience. So by strong positive emotion, he's talking about the Metta Bhavana, he's talking about metta. So the spiritual life isn't really possible without really trying to water the seeds. water the seeds of that, and we're not really benefiting ourselves or others if we're not trying to do that really. So without cultivating strong positive emotion, the fear and aversion that the Buddha was talking about in the sutta, in that discourse, what it can result in, or more commonly what it can result in, is a common affliction of indifference, a kind of emotional deadness where we're not very creative and not very connected. And what we're really trying to do, and what you're also trying to evoke, is a really radical engagement, which is what, if we really want to transform, that is what it's going to take. So this idea of turning towards, the idea of this practice, which has sort of been a bit life-changing for me, has been trying to really turn towards life and trying not to armour up. And the result of that is if we turn towards what arises, we're more likely to have a much more appropriate response to life, a much more appropriate response to ourselves. So that's where metta meets suffering, instead of fear, aversion, overwhelm, there's a real possibility that compassion could arise. And that's the love that flows when the dark comes out and this separate sense of ourselves isn't there. So even in the seeds of ordinary friendliness, there's some sort of a sense of self-transcendence, kind of selflessness. So I decided to embark on a path of training, because I sort of knew that I just couldn't do it myself through just wishing it. But what I found more and more, through turning towards, a space can open up in the heart that can hold much more. And I think to the nth degree, that is what it would look like when the dart is taken out. So there's this poet that I really like called David Whyte. And he says the only choice we have is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger, more courageous, and more compassionate. As we inhabit our vulnerabilities, we grow the heart space to have more room for life. And this is where we kind of then end up into a little bit of a mystery, where the heart space isn't necessarily me or mine. So the practice kind of takes us into this kind of mystery. So just near the ending, 3 minutes, great. So the reason why I asked for ordination is that teachings and the practices just made a lot of sense to me. And the whole idea of interconnectedness was that I needed to give up the idea of being kind of the solo heroine, because that was very enticing as well. And what I realised, this disarming and taking down the barriers meant really coming together with others. So in a way, I consciously decided to kind of commit my life as living a Buddhist and following the Buddhist ideals. So trying to do that meant really coming together with others. And there are definitely, I've been in contact with amazing people who've been my mentors that have really embodied these qualities much further down the path than myself. And what I find it really helps, not only is it a great boon and blessing to be in contact with these people, but also what it does is it allows me to be more faithful to my ideals. Because it's really easy to forget. I've had a lot of insights, but to live from them is a really different matter, and to see others embody that has given me a lot of faith. So asking for ordination and becoming ordained has been part of this desire to remove this dart and to revolve and serve a vision that's much greater than myself. So this is where metta kind of becomes the great love, to kind of serve the great love, which is this interconnectedness. So just to kind of end, I just wanted to summarize in a way what this transforming ideals into reality looks like. So I wanted to end with the words of my teacher. And we might need to translate it. So basically what he says are these 4 propositions. Man can change. He can change himself. He can help others to change, and together they can change the world. So you could change that to mankind can change. They can change themselves. They can help others to change, and together they can change the world. And I think this is what we're trying to do here. This is how this field has come into being, through people really working together. But basically that's my journey, and that's what I wanted to share.